Hi everyone, it's me, Sasha, the college psychologist, and I'm here to talk to you about sleep, how, why, and how to get more of it. What are we going to talk about in this workshop? I'm going to totally geek out on the science of sleep, how it works, the sleep stages, pressure, and circadian rhythms. So we've got a nice back understanding of how the biology of sleep works. I'm also going to talk to you about the misinformation out there about sleep that isn't true. We're going to talk about how sleep and school go together, and I'm going to give you some tips for improving your sleep cycles. But first of all, well done on tuning in and doing something proactive about your health. Sleep is something that we all do, and it's something that a lot of us have some not great habits for. But also something I've forgotten to put in this workshop. There is some evidence that just doing something about your sleep, only your sleep, can have a huge impact on your mental health. So well done on showing up today. So how does sleep work? Well, I think a lot of us think that when you go to sleep, you just fall asleep and then you wake up 8 hours later if you're lucky. But that's actually not true. Your sleep is more like a roller coaster ride with different highs and lows and depth to it. And there's actually 5 different stages of sleep. So when you fall asleep at night, you usually fall into stage 1 of sleep. And this is quite a light stage of sleep. And if someone was to wake you up at this time, you'd probably feel okay. You'd be able to wake up pretty easily. I'm not sure if you've ever seen a family member start to nod off on the couch and we say, Dad, you were asleep. It's like, no, I'm not. I wasn't asleep. They might not even believe that they were asleep. So that is what stage 1 usually looks like when you start to doze off. And if you stay in stage 2 for long enough, you will fall into stage 2, which is a lot like stage 1, slightly deeper. And that lasts for about 20 to 30 minutes in a general sleep cycle. And you'll still, if you're woken up at this time, feel fairly alert. Stages 3 and 4, we group these together. This is what we call the deeper stages of sleep. So after about 40 minutes in stage 2, you're moving into stage 3. If someone was to wake you up in stage 3 or stage 4, you're going to feel pretty groggy. You're going to feel pretty awful. And this is usually if you've had a not great night of sleep or you haven't got as much sleep as you really needed, your alarm goes off to go to school in the morning and you feel really, really tired. You've probably woken up in stage 3 or 4. So it's just a little bit here, those times where someone says, I slept through my alarm, I didn't even hear it. That's often in stage 3 and 4 as well. And the last stage of sleep is REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement sleep. Now, I'm not sure if you're as unusual as I was. When I was younger, I used to open the eyes of my sisters when they're asleep to see if they were faking it or not. And sometimes I would see their eyes rolling around in their head. And that was evidence that they were in REM sleep. So if you were to do the same thing, you might see someone else's eyes moving around, almost like they're watching a movie. So our brains move into REM sleep after about 40 minutes of sleep. And while it's at the end, and we would assume that this would be quite a deep stage of sleep, it's not. It's actually quite an active part of sleep. If you were to find out someone had been sleepwalking, it's usually in this stage of sleep. And this is where we dream. So REM sleep is actually quite brief. It lasts for 5 to 10 minutes. And like I said, that's where we dream. So a bit like that roller coaster analogy, a healthy night of sleep will look something like this. So you'll fall asleep, you'll move through stages 1, 2, 3, and 4, come back up into REM sleep for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then go back through that cycle. And as the night goes along, you're going to be spending less time in deep sleep because you've kind of got your fill of that. And you will start to notice you moving up and out of stage 1 and REM. So if you wake up to your alarm and you find that you have been dreaming, you can remember your dream, that's quite normal. You're probably moved into the lighter stages of sleep as the night has gone along. And I really want you to make note of in this diagram that this person who has a healthy night of sleep, is a healthy young adult, is actually had 3 periods of waking up and going back to sleep. And that's okay, that's completely normal. Okay, I want to talk to you about sleep pressure. Now, I know that sounds like a weird thing, but sleep pressure is actually one of the mechanisms that determines when and for how long we fall asleep for. And for this, I'm hoping you'll imagine a bit of a bucket filling up with water. So if we imagine the water to be our sleep pressure, the part of our body that makes us feel tired, feel sleepy, feel under pressure to fall asleep. So in the morning, our buckets are pretty empty. We feel fairly awake and alert because we've emptied them the night before. But throughout the day, our bucket slowly starts to fill up. That represents sleepiness. And by the time it's evening time, our buckets are pretty full. It's quite easy for us to tip over into sleep. And while we're asleep, I want you to imagine that that bucket has a valve at the bottom and it's slowly, slowly letting water out. So then when it comes time to wake up, we naturally wake up fairly easily because we've run out of sleep pressure. That's gone. So that's what a healthy sleep-wake cycle would look like. We'd increase sleep pressure throughout the day, and that would ease throughout the night, helping us to wake up and do the same thing again. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a late night, or I wake up really early in the morning, or I don't get as much sleep as I should have. And my sleep pressure cycle isn't working quite the way it should. So this usually means when we come to wake up in the morning, our sleep pressure bucket hasn't emptied properly. Let's say you get 4 hours sleep instead of 8, you're starting your day with a half full bucket of sleep pressure. So this means that throughout the day, when you usually might be more awake, your sleep pressure is increasing faster and faster than it usually would. But that also means when we eventually do get to bed, we're probably going to fall asleep a lot quicker than we usually would because our sleep pressure bucket is quite full. And I hope this diagram down here, you can kind of see how that trajectory would be going if you'd got enough sleep and how it's going to go if you haven't got enough sleep. Another thing impacting your sleep is your circadian rhythm. What a mouthful. So your circadian rhythms is almost like a biological clock that we all have that influences our sleep-wake cycle. And that controls the release of hormones, your body temperature, other chemicals related to sleepiness, your hunger, and that's controlled in your brain. And so for most of us, we have a fairly healthy circadian rhythm, one that allows us to feel awake during the day and when it's dark to feel sleepy and fall asleep. And it kind of goes a bit like this. Similarly to that, though, there's a lot of individual differences. So you might have heard of night owls or early birds. I know that I am a night owl and I would love to be an early bird, but it's not something I can change about myself. It's just how I'm built. So these terms refer to people who might have a more naturally timed early sleep-wake cycle, those are early birds, or a more naturally timed later sleep-wake cycle. That would be a night owl. We also find too that when you hit the age of being a teenager, your body tends to delay forward your body clock. So you might tend to be a person who maybe you were an early bird when you were younger, but you start to become more of a night owl when you're a teenager, which is totally normal and totally fine. Unfortunately, it doesn't align very well with school hours. Alrighty, now we know about the biology of how our body works, why we sleep, how we sleep. Let's talk about misconceptions about sleep. So, one of the biggest misconceptions about sleep, I think, that really doesn't help anybody get a good night's sleep is the idea I was awake all night and I didn't get any sleep. Now, this is usually occurring for people who might not have hit those deeper stages. Maybe you feel like you're up all night worrying, there was a lot of noise. If you've been actively trying to get to sleep for most of the night, it's very unlikely that you didn't fall asleep at all. Remembering that stages 1 and 2 are quite light and you might not even know that you've fallen asleep. So there's still probably good portions of the night where you've fallen into stage 1 and 2, which is still restful. It's still something. I'm also really hot on this topic because often we can find that if you're in that mindset, I didn't sleep, I can't sleep, that can lead to a lot of anxiety about nighttime waking. That means when you wake up in the middle of the night, you can start to go, oh gosh, I'm a person that can't fall back to sleep. I'm going to be awake. I'm going to be awake, which is going to fire your body up and going to make it harder to fall back to sleep. So if you remember from the graph below, nighttime waking is normal and to be expected. It's healthy. And the part that makes it unhealthy or unhelpful is when we start to panic about being awake. So getting small amounts of sleep, waking up, being in the earlier stages of sleep is very normal. So this diagram represents some of the thinking that can go into anxiety behind insomnia. So if you're a person who has lots of worry about not getting enough sleep, about waking up, you're going to be ruminating over the consequences of that, thinking over and over, oh my goodness, I've got so much to do tomorrow. I have to go to sleep. Why can't I get to sleep? It's so unfair. That's going to wake you up. So this box here about arousal, that emotional, that sadness. Why do I have to be a person who can't sleep? The fear. What's going to happen tomorrow if I don't get enough sleep? I've got an assessment. I've got lots of important things to do. Often that leads to consequences of not getting enough sleep, being tired, not doing as well as you wanted to the next day, not being in a good mood, not feeling like you want to socialize, all the negative consequences about sleep, which makes you even more afraid to not get enough sleep the next night. Your beliefs and attitudes box again is going to turn up. Oh my goodness, I'm not going to get to sleep again tonight. I have to get more sleep than I got last night. I have to make up for what I have lost today, which means you fall into maladaptive habits, right? So I'm going to spend more time in bed even though I can't stop thinking and I'm awake. I'm going to sleep during the day or I'm going to oversleep, irregular sleep schedules. I'm going to take a long nap in the middle of the day so I feel better, which makes it harder for me to get to sleep at night. Inappropriate use of hypnotics. I'm going to change that to inappropriate use of caffeine, inappropriate use of coffee, energy drinks. It makes it even harder to get your sleep schedule back on track. So this goes round and round and round for people who have insomnia. Another misconception, I've just left this one in here because it's a fun one. I don't dream. So you might remember that you're in your REM stage of sleep, your rapid eye movement sleep, that's when you dream. However, to make memories, we actually need to be awake to lay memory traces in our brain. So a lot of the time you are actually dreaming, but you haven't woken up to put down memory traces, so you're not going to remember it. I'm not sure about you, but I tend to remember my bad dreams more often than my good dreams. And that's very likely the fact that when I'm having a bad dream, I've got upset, I've got worried, and my body has woken me up. So I've put down a memory trace for that versus some of the nicer or more unusual dreams that I have and I can stay asleep for. Just a little fun fact down there too. Have you also heard about listening to class content or trying to study through headphones while you're asleep? This is a total piece of misinformation for the same reason. You have to be awake to put down memory traces. So just listening to study content while you're asleep is not going to help you. I'm just a bad sleeper. There's nothing I can do about it. And I've heard this quite a bit. This is something that runs in my family. We're just all bad sleepers. It can't be changed. That is not true. I don't think I would have a job if sleep wasn't something that could be changed. There's lots of strategies that can help you improve your sleep schedule, improve your sleep quality. I'm going to get onto that in a minute. There's lots of different habits, long-term behavior patterns, behavior that can be hard to change, but it is not impossible. So don't give up. Sleep and school. So I had a look at some of the research around school performance and sleep. And I think it's worth noting at open access, we give quite a bit more freedom than face-to-face school around managing your schedule, which can be really fun and flexible. It's got so much more free time to study, of course. Obviously, that's what you're doing with your spare time. but can make it a bit difficult if you're someone who struggles with discipline around sleep. I know I can put my hand up and say, I'm not sure I would be a very good open access student because I'm not great when there's open-ended boundaries to do whatever I want. So, why might it be important for you to put those boundaries in place and get enough sleep while you're here at open access? So, one study tells us that sleep deprivation, that is not getting enough sleep, poor sleep quality, that's not getting into the deeper stages of sleep, and sleep irregularity, sleep being all over the place. All of those negative sleep consequences have been associated with poorer academic performance, including worse end of semester marks. So we can see that bad sleep has a direct effect on your academic performance and your marks. Getting enough sleep had a positive impact on students' executive functioning. Now let's take a pause here to talk about what that means. That nice front part of your brain, the part that does reasoning, understanding, taking a step back from your emotions, thinking logically about things, thinking calmly, really, that's your executive functioning part of your brain, your ability to stop yourself from doing impulsive things and be able to sit through your work, be able to make good choices. So getting enough sleep has a positive impact on students' executive functioning. This included their ability to regulate their emotions, demonstrate self-control, be organized, and be flexible in their thinking. Essentially, that means if you're getting enough sleep, you're going to have all of those amazing self-control strategies to do your work, to be able to separate from your emotions, and to be able to do more creative, logical, flexible schoolwork. I've also put a note here too about open access specific school. So we're quite a unique school that all of our work is done online, is done on screens. So we're probably asking you to use a screen more than you would have in face-to-face school. Also, in your breaks, instead of being outside in the schoolyard, hanging out with people, getting natural light, we can often find that our students use their break times to play games, to watch TV on a device, or stay inside. And the artificial bright light that comes from computers, that comes from your iPads, that comes from your phone can have an impact on your sleep cycle, particularly a circadian rhythm we were talking about before, and particularly if used at the end of the day. So that's all good to know how sleep works and how it affects my school, but what can I do about it to get more effective sleep? I've got lots of tips for this. All right, caffeine. So, caffeine can have a powerful impact on our sleep cycle biologically. Caffeine is a drug. I'm not sure if you knew that. It is a part of the stimulant family, which means it gets your body working, gets you faster, turns everything up. So, caffeine has a half life of 6 hours. That means when you have your caffeine, you get a bit of a boost. It doesn't fade away completely, right? It eases away slowly over 6 hours, but it still is in your blood system. It's still having an effect on your arousal, making you awake. So while your body's breaking down the chemicals, that can take about 6 hours. And that means if you have a coffee at 4 o'clock, for example, your body will still feel the effects until 10 p.m. So if you're a person having caffeine later in the day, add 6 hours onto that. Caffeine, like most drugs, has a tolerance effect, and that means over time the same amount isn't going to be as effective. Your brain starts to increase the receptors that it has in there, which means you need more caffeine to have the same effect. So if you're a person who's noticing you're having more and more caffeine, it might be a good idea to try and tone down on that. All right, strategies. What are we going to do about it? So, for a general rule, no caffeine after 4 p.m. is a good idea, and I try and stick to this myself. Caffeine, if at all, early in the day is going to be better for you. Limit your caffeinated foods and drinks as much as possible. If you can have a set limit and make a decision not to have more than that in a day, you're going to be better off. And I've written a tip in the corner just because I find a lot of people don't know caffeine is in more foods than you might think. So, tea, has caffeine in it. We know obviously coffee does. Probably know that energy drinks do. But things like chocolate, I've written chocolate twice because I love it so much, and some medications can have caffeine in them. So just be mindful, have a look on the ingredients list, see how much you're taking on. And my last tip, if you're considering cutting down, do it slowly to reduce your withdrawal effects. Remember, caffeine is a drug, so you're going to experience some withdrawal effects if you go cold turkey. So you might have headaches, you're going to feel very tired if you're a person that's had lots of caffeine. So if you can cut down slowly, maybe changing it up week to week or day to day, depending on how much you're having, you're going to feel better. Alcohol. Now, I hope that anyone that I'm speaking to who's under 18 isn't using this as a strategy, but if you are, alcohol has the opposite effect of caffeine. So it's part of the depressant family of drugs, also a drug. So this can mean that you might feel sleepy when you drink. But alcohol also has a separate negative effect on our sleep cycle, in particular our REM cycles. So you can find that alcohol reduces your REM sleep at the start of the night, but it increases it towards the end of the night, which can result in nightmares, which isn't that nice. And it can also reduce your sleep quality overall. If you're a person who's had a big night out, and even though you've got 8 hours of sleep, you're probably going to find that you're still tired the next day because it's reduced your sleep quality. Also, if you're a person who's using alcohol to get to sleep because it does make you feel drowsy and sleepy, that can result in some unhealthy coping mechanisms in that you start to use alcohol as a crutch to sleep. And that's not a behavior that we want to set up in the long term. So, what's the strategy? If you can restrict your alcohol, your sleep quality will be better. Exercise. Exercise can be an amazing tool for sleep. It can be both harmful and helpful, just depending on when you are doing it. So exercise in the late afternoon or the early evening, so we're talking like 4 to 6 p.m., can help tire you out before bedtime. It's awesome. Get you like really worked up, really exhausted so that you feel like falling asleep earlier. But exercise that's too intense or too close to bedtime, let's say you're a person who likes to work out at like 9, 10, 11 p.m. I know there are late night gyms that do that. That can make you too alert and too awake, and you haven't got enough time to wind down before your bedtime. So, what's the strategy? Gentle to moderate exercise in the early afternoon or the early evening is great for sleep. Regular bedtime and wake up times. Now, I know a lot of us don't want to hear this. We want to sleep in on the weekends, we want to sleep in the holidays, we want to sleep in when we've had a bad night's sleep, but it's not great for your sleep cycle in general. So, we are creatures of habit. I'm sure you've noticed how hard it is to go to sleep early on a Sunday night after you've had a weekend of staying up late and trying to get back into routine after the holidays. Keeping a regular sleep wake cycle will really help you overall. There's also some research to say that young people with a higher GPA, that was correlated, that was associated, there was a relationship between early rising on weekends, keeping their bedtime similar. They ended up with better grades. So, what's the strategy? If you can, try not to vary your bedtime and your wake up time on the weekends or on days that you don't have classes. I know that's not easy if you've got a really varied schedule. I know we give you lots of freedom and flexibility in your day. But if you can pick the same bedtime and the same wake up time and follow that throughout the week, you will be better off. You will notice your circadian rhythm start to fall into that natural pattern. And on the weekends, even you might naturally wake up at that time. And I would say don't set yourself up for failure. If you're a person who has a 9 a.m. class on a Monday and then no classes on a Tuesday, I mean, you could expect yourself to wake up at 8, or you can even vary that by half an hour. But try not to, let's say, sleep until midday the next day, because then it's going to be really hard for you to get up at 8 o'clock the next day. So if you can be consistent, do. If you have a late night, try not to extend your wake up time too far from when you would usually wake up. So, for example, if you went to bed at 1 a.m. last night, you usually go to bed at 9, and now you know you need to get up at 8 a.m. You think, no, I'll just sleep until I wake up. That's going to make it really hard for you the next day. If you can, try and get up at 8 when you usually would. Stick to your wake up time despite the daytime sleepiness. That sleep pressure is going to be heavier that day, but that's going to help you fall asleep at a healthy time that night. Bedtime routine. Our brains love routine, and this helps get us ready for sleep. And we're also going to start associating that routine with being sleepy with going to bed if we can set it up like that. I've also written a note there about in order to fall asleep, our temperature needs to drop. I'm not sure if you've ever had a daytime nap where you've been sleeping and you've been really comfortable and then your alarm goes off and you throw off your blankets. Like, how was I sleeping like that? I'm so hot. How was I sleeping like that for half an hour? That's because your temperature has dropped while you've been asleep and it's risen in order for you to wake up. So we can use that to our advantage. Try a warm shower or bath before you go to bed. That will raise your temperature and then it will drop, getting you ready to fall asleep. Have a set bedtime routine that avoids too much light if you can. So that could be, an hour before I go to sleep, I read my book, or I brush my teeth, or I get my food ready for tomorrow. Anything that you can keep up throughout the week that triggers your brain to go, oh, yeah, it's time for bed. I know on my iPhone, I've got a sleep function. It just came with it. And an hour before bed, it starts to remind me that it's time for bed and it turns off all my notifications. And I find that really helpful trigger to go, oh, yeah, it's time for me to start my bedtime routine. Too close to bedtime, avoid anything that gets your brain working too hard. So if you want to go to sleep at 9, it's not a good idea to start your homework at 8 o'clock, or it's not a good idea to start watching a scary movie or to have a difficult conversation with your family. We're really trying to ease into that nighttime routine. Bedroom tips. Um, I know that this can be difficult for some people depending on the structure of your family, what you've got going on in the house, but if you can, restricting your beds to only for sleeping is optimal. So often our brains can start to make associations between the bed and being awake if we have insomnia, or watching TV, or doing fun things if we're a person who uses their bedroom as their safe space and ends up doing, fun things like playing games, video games in bed. Your brain is going to start to associate that fun stuff or that not so fun stuff, insomnia, with being awake. Also, we know that bright light and noise can affect your sleep, can wake you up. And so those can be things outside of your control. If you've got a bit of a noisy family, if you've got blinds that don't shut, but if you can have some control over that, that will be helpful. So what kind of strategies can we implement? Use the bed to sleep only. I can't stress this enough. Don't do your homework in your bed. Don't watch TV in your bed. If you can, try not to read in your bed. The bed is for sleep. And in line with this, if you are not falling asleep after 30 minutes, get out of bed. Sit in your office chair, sit in the lounge room, do something else. Try and keep the lights dim, try not to excite yourself, obviously, but getting out of bed can start to break that association between being awake and being in bed. Use lighting to your advantage. So if you can have a dimly lit room when it's time to go to bed, you can also open the curtains in the morning when you wake up. Those are going to stimulate your circadian rhythm both ways, right? Going to keep you calm, getting ready for sleep at night and wake you up in the morning. Some people sleep with their curtains open to try and help them naturally wake up a little bit in the morning. If you're in a noisy house, earplugs can be a good way to help you get to sleep. I know they're not for everybody. There are some soft versions out there that can help block out the noise. And make your bedroom somewhere that you want to be. If sleep is something that causes a bit of anxiety, Having maybe candles in your room or soft blankets, nice lighting, pictures that, make you want to be in there can help you start to associate the bedroom and the bed with somewhere that's going to be nice and relaxing. Devices. I bet this is one that you've definitely heard adults go on about before. But we do know that our devices are great at waking us up by both introducing exciting content, fun video games, social media, fast-paced content that excites our brain, but also by the light that it emits, waking you up, blue light straight into our eyes, particularly when it's this close. So if you can, avoid your devices 1 hour before you intend to go to sleep. And if you have to use your devices, you don't really have a choice. If you can, place them further away from your eyes. So if you're using a laptop, maybe putting it a bit further away. For some, they have a sleep function like your iPads and I know when you're reading a book on an iPad, that also has a turns the light away from being blue to being amber green. I think some of your iPhones are probably going to do that too if you can. Reading a paper book is always going to be better than reading an iPad, and can be a good alternative to scrolling social media before bed. So if you can, maybe replace your devices with reading, that's going to help you too. Okay, one tip on meditation. So one of the most common complaints for insomnia is bedtime rumination or anxiety. So that's when your thoughts are circling over and over and over. And if you've been a person that's distracted yourself for most of the day and then you finally hit the pillow and go, oh gosh, here's all the things that I need to worry about before tomorrow, it's going to be really hard to get to sleep. And the best buffer that we have for this is meditation. So, really, that practice of noticing your thoughts getting away from you and bringing them back, focusing on your breathing, focusing on how your body feels. And when it comes to insomnia, that might be something that you have to do 100 times. Catch yourself, bring yourself back, catch yourself, bring yourself back. But like going to the gym and exercising your muscles, that's something that you can get better at and get more efficient at catching yourself when you're starting to ruminate before bed, focusing on the present moment and hopefully slipping into stages 1 and 2 of sleep. And there's apps that can help you with this. So the Smiling Mind app has lots of free sleep specific meditations that are really good. I know I use these when I'm finding that I can't slip off to sleep. And there's also a number of practical strategies that you can do without an app. So some people try imagining their thoughts as clouds and watching the clouds float away. Other people imagine putting their thoughts onto a leaf on a stream and watching that float away, catching it again, putting it back on a leaf, watching it float away. I also talk to young people about imagining a cinema screen sometimes and throwing your worry up on the cinema screen and then watching it click over back to a black screen. I think it's like a viewfinder. Some people find that helpful. A bit of a fun one that I find useful, if I have thoughts popping up into my head, I'll imagine it like a piece of paper and I'll imagine having a stamp where I stamp either past, if it's a worry from the past, our future if it's a worry about the future. And I'll imagine that paper scrunching up and flying away, coming back to a black back of my eyes. That's something I find helpful. It may or may not work for you, but they all have the same premise, catching your thoughts and letting them pass, catching them, letting them pass, coming back to your body, coming back to the present moment. And that's it. That is all of my sleep tips. I hope this has been useful. I hope you can make even some small changes to your sleep schedule and you'll start to reap the benefits of better quality of sleep. Good on you for making an effort towards your health. All right, see you later.